Hi, this is Dr. Priya, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KCS Cars in Nadar College. In this particular video, we are going to see what is Transcendentalism and what are the key concepts of Transcendentalism, and also we are going to see about the history and development of Transcendentalism and the writers who were explored it. Come, let us go into this video and know more about it. Transcendentalism is a philosophical movement that developed in the late 1820s and 1830s in the eastern United States. A core belief is in the inherent goodness of people and nature, and while society and its institutions have corrupted the purity of the individual, people are at their best when truly self-reliant and independent. This knowledge comes through imagination and intuition, not through logic or senses. People can trust themselves and their own authority on what is right or wrong. This is called Transcendentalism. A transcendentalist is a person who accepts these ideas not as a religious beliefs but as a way of understanding life relationships. So in this particular slide we can see what did transcendentalists believe and also their key concepts which they generally accept. The intuitive faculty instead of the rational or sensic became the means for a conscious union of individual psyche, or what we call in Sanskrit as Atma, with the world psyche also known as the oversoul, the life force of a prime mover and God, which is also known as Brahma. And the key transcendentalism beliefs are, we can put it like this: humans are inherently good, but they can be corrupted by society and institutions. Insight and experience, and more important than logic, spirituality should come from the self, not from organized religion. And nature is something beautiful, so it should be respected. So these are the key transcendentalism beliefs. In this slide we can see what are transcendentalist values. The transcendentalist movement encompassed many beliefs, but these all fit into their three main values of individualism, idealism, and the divinity of nature. German scholar Immanuel Kant popularized the term Transcendentalism. It began as a reform movement in the Unitarian Church. So here we are going to see the philosophy, origin, and who were the famous writers of this particular theory and belief. Transcendentalism is a philosophy that began in the mid-19th century. Its founding members are Emerson and Thoreau. There are other major figures in this movement where Alcott, Fuller, Channing, Hedge, and Ripley are the famous figures of this particular moment. The Dial is a famous journal which published the transcendental works in the year 1840. It centers around the belief that spirituality cannot be achieved through reason and rationalism, but instead through self-reflection and intuition. Major writers wrote their articles in the journal The Dial from the year 1840, and also many published their works like Walden, Self-Reliance, and many more great works were published in this particular journal. Let us see the history of Transcendentalist movement. Transcendentalism originated in the early 18th century. The movement itself has its origin in 1830s New England, Massachusetts. Unitarianism was the first major religion in the area, and it emphasized spirituality and enlightenment through logic, knowledge, and rationality. Many of the first transcendentalists attended this school. In September 1836, Ralph Waldo Emerson organized the first meeting of what would be later called as the Transcendental Club. In the particular meeting, the Transcendentalists, or the people who have the same similar ideas, drew ideas from Romanticism, German philosophers, and Hindu spiritual texts as Upanishads. They formed this particular theory called Transcendentalism. The Transcendental Club continued to meet regularly, drawing in new members and key figures, particularly Emerson, Thoreau, published numerous essays to further spread transcendental beliefs. Especially, the Dial was created for transcendentalists to publish their works. But by the end of the 1840s, many key transcendentalists had begun to move on to other pursuits, and the movement declined. This decline was further hastened by the untimely death of Margaret Fuller, one of the leading transcendentalists and co-founder of the Dial. While there was a smaller second wave of transcendentalism during this time, the brief resurgence could not bring back the popularity of transcendentalism to its height. We can see about the key figures in the transcendentalism movement and their famous work. First and the foremost, we are going to see about Ralph Waldo Emerson. I quote, "Every man has his own courage and is betrayed because he seeks in himself the courage of other person," unquote, said Emerson. Emerson is the key figure in transcendentalism. He brought together many of the original transcendentalists, and his writing forms the foundation of many of the moment's belief through his writings. As we have seen earlier, Emerson was the one who started this Transcendental Club. Actually, the day before he published his essay, Nature, he invited a group of his friends to join his club, which was a meeting between like-minded individuals to discuss their belief. Actually, he continued to host club meetings, wrote essays, and gave speeches to promote Transcendentalism. Some of his important Transcendentalist essays are The Oversoul, Self-Reliance, The American Scholar, Divinity School Address. Now let us see about his work one by one. First, The Oversoul. The Oversoul is written in the concept that there is a universal spirit that lives in all. The universal mind or spirit that animates, motivates, and is the unifying principle of all living things. Emerson published his famous essay on Transcendentalism, Self-Reliance, in the year 1841. Emerson wrote this particular essay on sole purpose, that is the want for people to avoid conformity. He believed that in order for a man to truly be a man, he was to follow his own conscience and to his own thing. Essentially, do what you believe is right instead of blindly following the society. Actually, what does he want to convey to the audiences? Follow your consciousness and do what appeals right to you instead of blindly following the society and what others believe. He says, follow your consciousness and you'll be always right. That is what he propagates in his particular work, the very famous work, Self-Reliance. He says, rely on yourself than relying on others. And his next famous essay, The American Scholar, deals with intellectualism, especially in America. He says it needs to break from its dependence on European thought and it should shape itself within the distinctive character of America. To Emerson, the American scholar will be one that embraces his own individuality and non-conformity, rejecting conventional thinking. Man should turn to nature and within himself for his education. Emerson rejected the crude individualism, sometimes associated with American democracy in this particular work, The American Scholar. In this particular work, he defines how a scholar should be and how he should be individual in thought and how he should not follow what the society is said or what the people are following. He should not blindly do that. He should go on with his own thinking. In his Divinity School Address, Emerson presents to bring forth a new teacher, that is, the new teacher who can see the universe and its laws in totality, the world as the mirror of the soul, and who can see the correspondence of natural laws in it. Another important transcendentalist or a great believer of transcendental movement is Henry David Thoreau. Henry David Thoreau's famous work is Walden. Walden is a place situated near Concord, Massachusetts. And Walden, near this place, there is a pond. Thoreau has built a small hut and lived in this place for more than 2 years and 2 months. This particular place is owned by Emerson, and he explains or recounts his experience to us through this particular work, Walden. Henry David Thoreau lives alone in the small cabin on land owned by his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson, and was totally self-sufficient. He was growing his own vegetables, doing some odd jobs for more than 2 years. Through his experience, Thoreau examines the fundamental elements of humanity, and it is also considered as Thoreau's master work. Through this particular essay, he wants to prove to the world when man cuts down his unwanted The work also symbolizes the alternative to and withdraw from social conventions and obligation. It also symbolizes the vitality and tranquility of nature. And then we can move on to his next work, Civil Disobedience. Actually, he has written this to express his discontent about the government control over its citizens. In this particular essay, Thoreau argues that people should be allowed to act according to their beliefs rather than be obliged to follow laws dictated by the majority. And Thoreau argues that there are two laws, the laws of man and the higher laws of God and humanity. If the laws of men are unjust, the one has every right to disobey them. These are the major works of Henry David Thoreau. Margaret Fuller is another famous transcendentalist. Margaret Fuller wrote a famous work called Woman in the 19th Century, which was published in 1845. A year later, she was sent to Europe for the Tribune as a first female correspondent. She was an advocate of women's rights and in particularly women's education and the right to employment. In her work, Woman in the 19th Century, she argues that humanity will only become suited for the beauty of the world and heaven when freedom for women as much as for man shall be acknowledged as a right, not yielded as a concession. To conclude, we can say Transcendentalists led the celebration of the American experiment as one of individualism and self-reliance. They took progressive stands on women's rights, abolition of slavery, reform, and education. They criticized government, organized religion, laws, social institutions, and creeping industrialization. American Transcendentalism is essentially a kind of practice by which the world of facts and the categories of common sense are temporarily exchanged for the world of ideas and categories of imagination. The point of this exchange is to make life better by lifting us above the conflicts and the struggles that wait on our souls.